So yeah, before we get started, to all the participants here, because there will be a Q&A, so this is a slide about our organization, but because there will be a Q&A section, just a few ground rules. In order to ask a question, you can send a chat to the host, or you can raise your hand, and preferably you can raise your hand to speak to Ms. Aurora directly. But because we are having people speak, please be respectful. Please never assume the perspective of another group. Have an open mind. We don't tolerate inappropriate words, and we reserve the right to remove a participant, which has never happened. We hope never happens ever. So yeah, without further ado, let me introduce our speaker. Ms. Arora is a 34-year-old Indian-Canadian audit coordinator at the UN. She announced her candidacy to challenge incumbent UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in the 2021 UN Secretary General leadership selection. She is the first woman and the first millennial candidate for the position, and the first ever known candidate to challenge an incumbent. Ms. Aurora, if selected, would be the youngest ever and first female Secretary General of the UN in its 34-year history. So she'll be with us for about 40 minutes. So without further ado, I will give her the floor. Ms. Arora, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Hi, Selena. Thanks so much for inviting me to this event. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. So I'll just start by telling you a bit about myself as a person and then what inspired me to run for the position of Secretary General. So I was born in India, raised in Saudi Arabia, and then moved to Canada for college. In India, I come from a family of refugees. All four of my grandparents were refugees from Pakistan to India after the partition in 1947, and they came with nothing but clothes on their back. And on my dad's side, my grandparents were street vendors. On my mom's side, my granddad was the only working member supporting a family of 7, and he was a mailman with the government. They couldn't complete their education, so their biggest goal was to make sure their children, my parents, are educated, and they were successfully able to do that. My parents are physicians, and so I was born in a family that really knows the importance of hard work and education and uplifting ourselves from poverty. When I was 6, we moved to Saudi. Saudi was a really fun childhood for me. We lived close to Yemen, so we had a lot of Yemeni in my neighborhood. And back then, Saudi did have school for girls, and they still do now too. But the schools where I lived were in Arabic. They weren't in English, and like math was in Arabic, science was in Arabic, and I couldn't pick up at that age. So I was homeschooled till 9, and then I moved back to India for boarding school. 18, moved to Canada for college. Canada was a very warm and welcoming country. I moved there as an immigrant. So I remember my first day in college, everyone was greeting each other saying, "Hey," and I'm like, why are they calling each other grass? So I'm glad I never asked that question. I figured that out. And I graduated business, became a manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers in audit, wrote audit standards for Canada, taught at University of Toronto audit, wrote elections guidelines for Canada. And then I get a call from the UN. In 2016, the context was that Donald Trump was elected as president, and so was the current Secretary General elected, and financial reforms of the UN was a big portfolio. So just so you guys know, UN is a word that includes 100 entities and a budget of more than $50 billion. And US contributes 25% of that budget. So that's almost $10 billion. And that's where US wanted to make sure that their money is used efficiently. And of course, it's not used efficiently. For every dollar, 30 cents is used for the cause. And that's where I was hired to help with that. And yeah, I'll pause here, Selena, for you to start with that journey of UN, but this is just what led up to me joining the UN.
Of course, thank you so much. And could you tell us, I know in your campaign, you told us about how the UN is not living up to its promises. So could you give us some statistics and tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I'll pick up where I left. So when I was hired to be part of the financial reforms of the UN, I was thrilled. I was beyond words that I'm invited to an elite organization like the UN to contribute in such meaningful ways. And from the outside, UN looks like such a pristine and clear organization, and you're like, wow, I'm just going to make a difference in the world. But I realized that UN from the outside is different than the UN from inside. And this is where I'll just explain to you guys as students on like what the UN is from the inside. So there are two United Nations. There's a UN that makes decisions, which is General Assembly, Security Council, Economic and Social Commission, and it's covered extensively in the media. I'm sure you've heard like Security Council, veto, Myanmar, da da da. So that's decision making. Then there's a UN that implements the decision, and this distinction between decision making and implementation UN came about when League of Nations transitioned to the charter. So League of Nations was the first attempt to create an international organization after World War I. And the goal was to prevent World War II, but it wasn't successful. We had World War II, so UN was the second attempt to bring it together. And in the second attempt, the member states, the founders were like, okay, what can we do differently? And one of the things that they wanted to do differently was to make sure that there is a distinction between decision making and implementing. It's almost like Congress, legislation, and the executive body. That distinction was made. So in the implementation side, the statistics that you're asking, the UN is absolutely failing, and the only people who are ever able to share that information are employees of the UN. And the employees of the UN are paid a generous salary. That why would they want to come out? And even if they do come out, that it's not that the world is supportive to them to like, come and share their stories. So the stats are for every dollar today, 29 cents is used for the cause. Just pause for a second. 71 cents is bureaucracy. Everything else, that 29 cents is what gets used for the cause. How does that impact us? Today, we have the highest number of refugees, displaced, and stateless people in the world. And you might sit here and think, wait, how does that matter to me? Like refugees, displaced, and stateless people, it does. You know why? Because all the countries in the world today invest significantly in armament, in military. Why do they do that? Because terrorism is on the rise. How is terrorism on the rise? Where are terrorists recruiting people from? They are recruiting people from who are displaced, refugees, and stateless, whose basic humanitarian needs UN is not meeting. UN today is not able to meet their basic needs. So these refugees, displaced, stateless people, or people of concern, are left to fend for themselves. And what choices do they have? They're smuggled, they're trafficked, they're lured to join terrorist organization. And because UN is not doing its jobs, countries invest in like anti-terrorism, and that impacts us. The other statistics, which will be extremely shocking to you, is climate action. Like, your generation mobilized the world leaders around climate. So this is perhaps a question I have for you. For every dollar the UN gets for climate, how much do you think goes into nature-based solution, which is the cause, and how much is bureaucracy?
I already know the answer, but I would like everyone to put in the chat because it is a very shocking number.
It's very shocking. It's on my website.
Maybe 20% for dollar.
That's close. It's on my website to Aurora for SG in case someone wants to do a quick cheat. 12. Okay. Yeah, it's around that. It's 15 cents to a dollar. 15 cents to a dollar goes into activities that will directly combat climate change, which is somehow invest in activities that would absorb the carbon dioxide, like nature-based solution, or invest in activities that would prevent future release of carbon dioxide. So those are called nature-based solutions, and only 15 cents. Everything else goes into talking and holding conferences and writing reports. And this is where they're banking. They're banking on you guys to be overwhelmed by their talks, to not follow through. Because to be honest, when something is not directly impacting you, people are like, oh yeah, they said they're doing it. Saying is not doing, and that's what my candidacy is all about. So that's another shocking stat, which I discovered. The other thing is development. Development is UN's big mandate, like Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sure you've heard of it, blah, blah, blah. So in 1980, China's GDP was below all but 3 African countries. Look where China is today with no UN assistance, and where Africa still is, which has received almost 60% of UN funding over the last 40 years. What happened? UN's approach to development is a top-down approach of giving money to the top and hope it'll trickle down to the bottom, and that hasn't worked. So the only approach to development that has worked for countries that have been successful is those who have invested in bottom-up solution and not top-down. So that's another stat that is extremely shocking, that today half of the world has access to internet, the other half is not connected. And UN is not doing anything about it. You know, in the last 3 years, UN has produced 3 reports on the importance of internet, and not even one community received internet. So, and I didn't know this until you go inside and you realize, what's my job? And my job is to write reports that were written the year before, to make a few updates to numbers. And that is where a lot of work goes. And as a staff member, when you question that, you really are intimidated. Like, you know, there's threat of your contract not being renewed. There is a big fear culture. And yeah, so that I'll probably like leave you guys to ask more questions about it if this is a topic that interests you. But yeah, those are the stats.
I think we have a question from Akila. Would you like to say it yourself, or do you want me to read it?
Actually, I just realized one stat before that. What do you think, guys, is the average age of the world today?
I'm gonna guess 30.
Yeah, you guys are right. It is 30. So, and youth definition is under 35. So majority of the world is under 35. What is the age of the current Secretary General? 72. What is the age of average leadership of all the UN people? Is 62. So yeah, just some shocking stats that you will inherit a world that you have no control over right now in decision-making process. So yeah, I can see Selena, if you can read me the question.
I think I saw Akila unmuting herself, or
Oh yeah, sure, Akila, go ahead.
Yeah, so can you explain your experience as the first woman of color to challenge an incumbent?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll explain, like, when I learned all these shocking facts, what transpired, or what motivated me to run for the position of Secretary General. So I mean, these are all the hard facts, that the numbers I've shared. I think in a soft fact culture, like just the culture of the UN is something that really was a big determining factor for me to run for this position. So my first week at the UN, like, you know, as part of the reforms team, the entire team joined January 2nd. I just came a week before, so December 21st. So my first week was Secretary General's first day. And as protocol, he's supposed to give speech to the staff before he goes up to his office. And in our lobby, we had a makeshift podium. The speech was supposed to start at 9:15. I was there at 9. And like a lot of employees, like, you know, of course you want a good spot. He comes in at 9:15. He stands on that makeshift podium, which is a rectangle. And behind him come series of men, all our leadership, and they just come and cut all the staff and stand like a horseshoe by that podium. Like, absolutely ignored and belittled staff. And I was shocked. I do not remember one thing the Secretary General said. I just remember the feeling of being belittled by leadership, because having been an auditor and audited like major banks in the world, to like private companies, large ones, to not-for-profits and governments, I have never seen leadership of any entity behave like this. You know, the job of a leader is to inspire people to do the work, because you cannot do everything yourself. You have to create an environment for people to produce and bring their best. And this is a leadership that just is like all about their self-interest. And I was like shocked. And this was my first week. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm missing something. But over my time at the UN, I've seen this behavior like of UN leadership, not just towards employees, but towards those we're supposed to serve. For example, I was in Africa for a work trip in Uganda, and I saw a child eat mud. It's a very devastating image for me, because here I am staying in a good hotel, being able to eat anything I want. And this little girl by the gas station is eating mud. All I could do for her at that time was give her some food and cash. And I asked people around if she was related to them, and they didn't even stop to respond. That image has always been stuck with me. So when I came to New York back, I asked one of our senior officials, like, you know, why is that child eating mud? Why can't we do things differently? And you know what that senior official said? I quote, "Mud is good for children. It has iron." And this is the level of apathy that they have for the cause they're there for. They have this attitude of belittling towards employees. And I think just the stats of like realizing we have all the money, we have the talent to do things, we just don't have good leadership, is what made me decide that I'm going to run for this position. And then your question, like woman of color, I think identifiers for myself. Like, I know when the world looks at me, they look at me as a woman. My gender becomes an identity. My age becomes an identity. Any factor, like, maybe my accent, then you try to geographically place me. In 6 weeks of being at the UN, I got hit by a cab. I was leaving work late, and right outside the UN, I got hit by a cab. I was taken to the ER. I'd broken my knee. I had bleeding and bruising all over my body. And I didn't know if I would ever be able to have a normal life. Like, I didn't know the extent of internal damage. And in those moments, I realized, oh my God, if I had died today, what would my obituary read? Aurora was a selfish person dedicated to the pursuit of happiness for herself alone. Because until that time, I had turned 30, my life had been all about my personal trophies. Like, I graduated summa cum laude. I basically became, like, I achieved the pinnacle of success in my profession within 7 years, or of being there. Like, in 5 years, I was the youngest professor and writing standards. So that's what my life was all about. Like, it wasn't about giving. And here I was, like, thankfully not on my deathbed, but something closer. And I was like, I'm just so much filled with regret of what I've done my entire life. So that's when the ground underneath me shifted at a personal level, where I transitioned from being a selfish person to selfless. So my decision to run was purely because I know the system is not working, and I know everyone in the system knows, and I've got to do something about it because no one else is. And the system is banking, it's banking on the fact that the young generation will not care about the UN, that the young generation who is on social media, which means that they have some level of privilege in life, are just so busy living their own life. They're not going to care about the UN. They're not going to even believe that UN is that bad, and they'll just get away with everything. So that is just, and this is something I'll definitely expand on a bit more, but like, in terms of women of color, I realize that it still is impactful to those who are women, who are younger and of color, on that they can also do it. So I encourage anyone and everyone to run, and I understand the effect of seeing someone like you running. But for me, that wasn't the decision. It was more like at a human level. We're all humans. We've all got to do our part in making a difference in the world. We've always been takers, and it takes a lot of sacrifice to be a giver. It's not an easy journey. And for me, that's the path I've decided for myself.
Oh, that is super inspiring. Thank you so much. I saw a question from Carter.
Yeah, thank you. So this message you have about creating actual change at the UN and doing actual action, I think it's like really, really inspiring, for one. But my question would be, are people at the UN, or do you think people at the UN are receptive to that message? Like, do they want actual change, or do you find most of your support with like the younger generation or some other group of people that actually wants that change to happen?
Yeah, thanks, Carter. This is good. Selena, I don't know if you shared with the team my vision statement, so I'll probably put it in the chat for everyone to see. It's auroraforsg.org. If you go there, the vision statement is right there, and I'm just so proud of it because it was crowdsourced with the help of 200 policy experts, 300 volunteers, and beautifully designed by Venture 3. And it's just, it's deliberately easy to read, so you can absorb compared to all the other vision statements you would ever have seen. So Carter, your question on the change and employees' reception. So I announced my candidacy on Feb 9th, and I, of course, did not give an advance notice to the world, or said that I was in prep mode. I just announced, and my biggest supporters are the employees of the UN. They are the ones who absolutely really care about the UN, which is why they still are there. And they realize that the voices of employees and the voices of professionals is never heard in politics. Myanmar, right? This crisis is going on right now. So, if in our communities, if there is a murder, the entire police department is investigating, you hire experts. And if you see a trend of a murder repeating itself, and then there's a potential serial killer, there are teams of psychologists, criminologists, every profession you can think of that are trying to understand the psychology of this person and trying to beat them in their game. And there's so much effort on let's just say even more than 2 murders when we can conclude it's a serial killer. I don't understand that. How is it that UN has been in existence for 75 years and they don't even have a dedicated department to conflict resolution and mediation? there are no psychologists on board. There are no negotiators on board. So this whole Myanmar thing, you know how they dealt with it? Feb 1, the coup happened, and they're like tweeting, "We condemn, da 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 da." And I'm like, this is not the way. If someone is engaging in behavior like this, you cannot then expect that public condemnation will work, because that has made things worse. And your generation is paying the price. The Gen Zs whose lives are lost for that cause is so sad. And they did not engage with Myanmar until like a week ago with ASEAN conference. So employees are very supportive. The world is super supportive. And this administration is just shocked at even the great ideas that people are putting forward, and how change is around the corner. And it's just bringing that creative idea. So I'm not worried about the change coming. I think I'm just worried about I think I can just tell you guys where things stand in terms of my campaign right now. In 2015, the UN passed a resolution that allowed Secretary General selection process to be more open and transparent. So just so you know, in the 75-year history of the UN, the first 70 years, the Secretary General was selected exactly the way the Pope is selected, by the conclave, a very hushed backdoor decision. You don't even know who the names are. In 2015, they said, we've got to make it a bit more open, let people nominate and go from there. So 2016 election, that's what happened. So 2021, you would expect an election to happen. Now they're doing everything in their power to bypass an election process. And I am just like, I'm not the only candidate. There are 5, I don't even, so there's no repository of how many candidates there are. I hear there are 5 more candidates, and the UN has not recognized them on their official website. They're not conducting a hearing with them. And basically they are not following a democratic process. And they're like, I'll repeat myself because I'm just so disgusted at this, because I heard these comments coming from inside the system. They are banking that your generation will not care. They're banking you are busy with TikToks and so many other things that you don't really care about anything that doesn't personally affect you. And it's hard to bridge that connection between UN failures and your life today. But I can assure you, the UN failures will affect your life in 20 years from now, because the climate crisis, if it only gets 15 cents to $1, the question will not be in 20 years from now, who will be the next Secretary General? It would be where you live. And that crisis will be 1,000 times worse than COVID. And it's not that COVID was managed properly. So that's really what's at stake. And that is perhaps my call to action right now to everyone on this call, because this is a group, it's a small group, but I know you're very passionate about politics, you're very passionate about democracy, and they're just bypassing the process. And if they bypass a process, they're basically saying, we will always give this job to elitists like us. No one else stands a chance, unless there's a backdoor dealing where powerful countries say, oh, I like this candidate because they'll do things for me. You can never expect a fair process.
Yeah, definitely. And I hope, and I think, as you said, everyone here really do care. I think that really leads nicely to a question from Tarika. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, how can the average person or youth help with these discrepancies?
Perhaps I won't, let's have a discussion on this. And the reason I say that is because I'm double your age, you guys. I can share my message with you. If you go on my website, there's a petition you can sign. I need help. I need your help in bringing this message to your generation more. Like, I can make my own videos. But I really need your help in making this a movement and bringing it to your generation, because truthfully, I'm doing everything I can. And I don't think it's getting to as many people as it should. So I'm open to all your help possible on getting this movement out there. I mean, petition signing is one thing, but it really should be outrageous that we're not having an election in an institution that preaches democracy to the world, in an institution that promotes gender equality. We've never had a female Secretary General, in an institution, and all these politicians who promote youth inclusiveness. Like, that's almost BS, to be honest with you, because here you have a youth, you're not even giving them a chance. And I think, so my story of like running for this candidacy, it's a 2-year-old story. So when I concluded my work on the reforms team, I was just so shocked I tried to change the system internally, of course. After my accident, I knew that I wanted to make a difference in the world. And this was a great opportunity to be part of UN reforms. I tried to change the system internally. I was unsuccessful. The reform turned out to be a reshuffle. And my colleagues would laugh at me. They said, you know, think about it. We've had 9 secretary general and 8 reforms of the organization. So everyone except the first guy has reformed. What does this tell you? That they're all reshuffles. And I didn't believe it until I saw it myself. And in December 2018, when reforms concluded, January, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to run myself. So I had 2 years to prepare all the data, facts, figures, my message. Never in my life did I think that when I would announce my candidacy, I would be facing discrimination. Discrimination on the basis of my age, discrimination on the basis of my experiences. And it's just, I think, been the most emotional part of this whole candidacy is discrimination. And discrimination is very painful. And I'm not saying I'm the only person who's experienced it. We've all experienced it. I've experienced it on the basis of other factors before. I think what hurts is that facing discrimination from world leaders who are just preaching all these things, like the Biden administration that seems to be all about equality, fairness. I haven't even responded to my emails to request a meeting to discuss my candidacy. All these Western global North, like democracies of the world, female leaders, none of them have responded. The countries that have met with me are smaller countries. And I've had like these 2 beautiful interactions, which have been some relief, where ambassadors are like, if there is one person who they think will ever change the UN, it's probably me, because it's a rare mix of being inspiring, being a leader, and knowing your facts. Like, you know, you're not just talking words written by other people, you have your own ideas. And I was like, that's great. So do you want to like go at next, like publicly support me? No, we're so scared. And that's just the journey of discrimination. You know, I mean, Galileo Galilei, when he said Earth is not the center of the universe, he was shunned by the church. The majority at any given time will treat minority the way they feel fits them. Nobility, peasants, that's what the revolution was about, French Revolution. And then you go into men doing it to women. Like, you know, I mean, until mid-90s, women couldn't go to Harvard Law. Like, they're like, oh, law doesn't require women. And BLM, like we know, like even with civil rights movement passed in 60s, we still are struggling with it. So this is the discrimination that we're facing as a generation. And today I'm facing it personally, but this is not personal. This is against our generation, and tomorrow you will face it. And they'll just tell us to set our aspirations lower, but why? It's a fair process. We should all be heard and given a chance. So yeah, that is the most painful. And I honestly request you guys to be involved in this, because for me, I'm not running for this position because I seek power. I'm just running because no one else was doing and calling out the UN and having a plan for the future. There is a vacuum in leadership. Like, we're just like tweeting and talking about what's our vision, long-term vision for the world. And that's where in my vision statement, I described that we need tech. Like, how is it that, I mean, you guys are in Silicon Valley. How is it that you have entrepreneurs who come up with like the weirdest things, like, you know, a camera app that makes your smile brighter, teeth whiter. I mean, this is sure helpful, but it's not the most pressing things in our life. Like, there is no tech used for humanity. Why is it we still have to send translators to Syria, spend so much money? Why don't we have an app that the UN is creating? Why don't we have contact tracing global app yet? Like, it's just so many things, and there's no leadership. And like I said, I think they're just banking on you guys to forget and not care and not have enough momentum. And then I get asked, you know, you have to pull something like Greta and stuff. And I just think to myself, that was Greta successful because she was able to connect the dots between your longevity and the planet? And maybe then I have to call out that just because we cannot see the problem today, in 20 years, I assure you, this climate crisis that you're talking about, you'll see the consequences, because they're just talking about it, not investing money.
Yeah, definitely. I think one way, at least for us, to start helping out right away is I'm going to drop the link to volunteer for Ms. Aurora's campaign in the chat. So it's also on the website. So I think the website is really like worth exploring. But I guess
Twitter and Instagram handles, if you want to just DM me there with your ideas, go for it too. But like I said, honestly, it's discrimination is not new. It's just what would be new is if we don't fight it and ignore it until like we directly feel the pain.
I have a question that is, what is kind of the process of your campaign? Because we kind of all know how a presidential campaign works, but as you said, this is really kind of, in the shade, kind of hush hush. So what's your strategy, and like, how are you fighting against their kind of trying to keep the other candidates unknown?
So like I said, this is the first time we had an election was 2016. So this was the second time. And we thought that they would follow the exact same process, which is when you announce your candidacy, you're acknowledged on the website, then you're given a hearing date, you produce your vision statement, you're allowed to present to member states, and then you're on the ballot. And then they vote. What they're doing now is that I've announced my candidacy, submitted my vision statement, and they haven't acknowledged me on the website. So I don't even have a hearing date. And until you get that, it's hard. You're not on the ballot. And the other candidates, the thing is, like I said, I don't know all their names. I know a couple, and it's almost the same thing. So in terms of process, there is a process of 2016. Candidates submit their name, you acknowledge they're on the website, you give them a hearing, and then you vote. And they can express their dissent at the voting stage. Expressing dissent at it's almost like a nomination stage is where it meets the legal definition of discrimination. Especially when you have a resolution that says you are allowed to have self-nominated candidates. It just doesn't have to be from a country. So in terms of my process, I announced in Feb, and then in March, I'm as a Canadian citizen, I reached out to Canada. And I think that's where the biggest hypocrisy I've seen, because like, you know how our leader of the world, like Canada, like Justin Trudeau, like he just promotes equality, fairness, da, 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 da. But when it comes to like supporting your own citizen and a candidacy that's inspired by Canadian values, they haven't even acknowledged, like I met them and they haven't even responded to the request for nomination. And I think I then emailed all the countries, 193 of them, 7 of them responded. I took meetings, and like I said, there's just a fear of retaliation by European Union, that the smaller countries are scared, and the bigger ones did not even respond. I reached out to them again yesterday, shared my vision statement, and here we are. And I think now it'll have to be a people's movement. Like, and we will just as a generation have to stand up to say, our generation is just given visitation rights and not participation right. Like, today, if you go on un.org, you only have 2 ways to get involved: donate or advocate. And that's not good enough for you guys. You're all doers. That in my vision statement, I specifically say that 25% of leadership positions have to go to the youth. And that will just bring all the change and tech and innovation and inclusivity that we need in the UN of today. Yeah, like I said, I think they're just banking on you guys being busy and having other things to worry about, places to be, things to do, that because it doesn't directly affect you today, you'll just ignore it.
Yeah, one thing I've always been, I think almost all of us are in high school, and a lot of us are involved with Model UN. And I've always loved the activity. But then after listening to you, I suddenly have this epiphany. It's like, oh, we Model UN, all we do is talk. Like, how we get, medals, we get awards. What does that do to the world? Kind of nothing. So I guess, what would you say, I don't know, is something possible for Model UN as a community to do?
I think this is something I've thought a lot about, that how is it that the UN of today is so bad and no one says anything? And I think we've kind of realized that the UN of today just virtue signals, being woke, they virtue signal, oh my God, look, we're talking about it, look, we're doing, but no one takes things all the way through. And I think that's what Model UN has become a reflection of, that you just talk, and anyone who's participated in Model UN, deep down, ask yourself, you're doing it so you can write it in your college applications, or you can somehow see how that would benefit you. Everything we do in life boils down to our personal benefit for us. How is that directly going to forward our cause? And that's what the UN of today has become. Every politician who's there, every leader is just forwarding their cause by saying the right things, doing the right things. And those of us, like rare people like me, who are just like, okay, wait, what the fuck is going on? Why are we not like saying that all the money just goes into talking and nothing? So it's model UN, I think, will have to transition to projects where you'll have to take a project, $20 million, let's say, is to go clean the ocean in X place. Then I think we will have to invest in how would you go creatively, what partnerships will you create? And then you just give project of cutting down the budget. Okay, now you just have 2 million. How will you make it happen? So I think model UN needs to transition from talking to actual problem solving, and what strategies would you use? Like I said, I urge everyone to read the vision statement. It would open your eyes to the problems and the solutions that are out there in the world, but just not being capitalized.
Thank you so much for the answer. Does anyone else in the audience have questions?
I have one. You've sort of spoken to this, but I'd be curious, if you could rewind the clock, and, be in high school, what things would you do differently? What things would you do the same? What guidance do you have?
I don't know which person would ever want to relive high school days. I mean, I know those who enjoy high school are just a rare breed of people. I'm trying to remember. I think I was, so I went to boarding school from 9 to 18. So it kind of was like almost the same school for me that I was in. And my initial years, I definitely dropped the ball on studying, and I would be like more, I would be so much more flamboyant in like, making sure that I give trouble to my teachers. And like, this is back then in India, like, in the middle of the night, like you would like, you would just play pranks on your teacher, like just knock on their door, like have powder outside their door, and like, just have balloons, water and stuff. So of course I had all that fun. But high school is where I actually got serious. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, I have to figure out a life, like, for myself. I can't, like, just get grades. Like, I think my grades used to be like B's or B pluses. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is so bad. I'm not going to get anywhere in life with this. So I think I actually upped my game a lot in high school. Like, so I was a certified nerd. Very few friends, all about grades. And I don't think I would do anything differently to that, because every person has a superpower that they're proud of. And I think because I had so much fun, like in middle school and like in all that time, that I ended up developing a superpower of just having that strong focus and dedication. Like, it's really hard for someone like me to be distracted. Like, when I had my accident in Feb 2017, and I promised God that I was going to live my life dedicating to making a difference in the world. Like, there were so many tough moments at the UN, like, you like from sexual abuse to like so many other racist comments you hear, and like such poor behavior from the staff so from the leadership of the UN, that I endured all that. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on the one thing that I promised God, and just shut everything out. So, and I think I developed that trait in high school, that just ability to be focused and just be disciplined. So I wouldn't do anything differently. But one thing that in life, if I didn't have my accident, I think I wouldn't have become the selfless person I am today. Because until my accident, like I said, every initiative I would undertake would be forwarding my cause. So I definitely commend all of you for being here, taking the time in just listening to me, because I was just so focused, and like anything that serves my cause, I would do that. I would of course donate a little, volunteer a little, but not play a big game in life. So that's where my accident changed me. But high school, yeah, I would never want to relive those days again. But whatever happened, I think it worked out okay.
I have a quick question. Personally, I'm really passionate about journalism, And you said about all of those things in the UN that's been happening and with like employees and with like the problems within the system, but it's just like not a lot of visibility to that. So what would you say is the role journalists should play?
I think this is something I actually talk to journalists a lot about, because now I get interviewed, and I have a huge sympathy for journalists. I have to tell you, I mean, especially because my exposure to journalists was only after I announced my candidacy. And until that time, we lived in this Trump era of like fake news, fake news, fake news. So I didn't know what to expect of journalists. But I have to say, my experience has been so pleasant, because the journalists I speak with, they are so ethical, they have so much integrity, and they actually fact check things, and they do all the effort and stuff they need. And I've asked them, why are these stories not told? And I think this is where you realize there's a big corporate machine, that there are a couple establishments that have not even covered my story because they're scared to offend the UN. And because they're scared to offend the UN, they don't even speak out, like publish a story that there's a candidate running for the position of Secretary General. So the role of journalist is what it has always been, to seek truth and do what the right thing is. And if anyone wants to write any stories about employees of the UN, reach out to me. I will happily connect you with the right people, because there are a lot of stories to be told in the UN, and it's just a black box. No one knows. Like, until I told you guys there are 2 UNs, I'm sure you didn't even exactly know what the UN was. You just heard of it. And I think I'll just give this one example, that when it comes to our own lives, implementation is how you judge everything. COVID happened, just when heads of states passed a decision that we'll invest in a vaccine. Would any of us call that success, a decision? No, right? It's just a decision, it's just words. You are not going to believe anyone on their words alone. We know that. Even when a vaccine was created, would any of us call it success? No, because it really hasn't gotten to you. So for our own lives, we judge success by implementation when we see the results. But for the lives of others, these people who have no one but the UN to rely on, we just judge on words and stop. And this is where journalism stops. It stops at decision making. It only covers decision making. It doesn't take all the way through, because there are resource constraints, because people are not interested in the story. And this is my appeal to your generation, is Twitter, Instagram, just because you can, words are not enough. Just take things all the way through. Okay, they're saying we condemn junta. Okay, what are you doing about it? You're just condemning them. That's not a solution. It's like, and UN diplomacy is almost like your family. If you have a fight with your sibling, what are you going to do? You're going to complain to your parents? Sure, you can do it once. You can do it twice. After a point, your parents would be like, figure it out yourself. And that's what diplomacy is. How do you work out a problem? How do you work out a solution with someone who you disagree with? You talk. You're not going to start saying bad things about your one sibling to another and hope that they'll just do the right thing by condemning them. It's almost basic stuff. And their UN thrives on complexity, confusion, to say that you'll just stay far away from it. But it's just so simple. There's nothing complex about it.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you have any engagements after this. Would you have time for one last question from Akila? Go ahead, Akila.
Yeah, so I know that we're almost out of time, so I'll make this quick. So how do you suggest young people use their voice to stand up against injustice and corruption? Essentially, how do we show the UN that young people actually do care about these issues and we're not on TikTok all the time?
Yeah, I agree. It's a perfect closing question. This is where I have a website which has a petition form. If we can get to 10,000 petitions to show the UN, because the way that petition works on a back end, all the ambassadors get an email that you support change, you're tired of their BS. I think it's honestly writing open letters to the Secretary General, to me, and I'll just tweet about it, post about it, tweeting, tagging, and making noise. And this is where joining the movement for a new UN. I am happy to, Selena and I met at an event, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. She reached out for this event, and hopefully all of you are inspired that you can just be the spokesperson yourself and start spreading the word and going, helping awareness. And one thing I would say is social media is we're all so judgmental. I'm saying this about myself too. like whenever you look at someone's social media profile, you're like, how many followers do they have? And that's something of feedback I get. They're like, oh my gosh, it just has like 20 something, 2000 something on like 2600 on Instagram. Is she even like making a mark with people? Like 336, I think 100 on Twitter. So I think just follow and encourage others to follow, and like just simple things, because they seem to be judgmental on numbers. And I'm open, honestly, whatever you think helps with the movement, because like I said, I am double your age. I'm doing the best I can. I can just communicate my message. I hope that you can communicate it to 10 people, sign the petition. Let's get to 1,000 and shock the system. And God willing, we can get to 10,000, 1 million, and we would have made a mark.
Thank you so much for the answer. And I'm sure a lot of us here who hope to work in the UN are hoping that you will be our future boss.
Thank you. Well, if I have to say one thing, that you don't have to wait to work at the UN. You can start doing great work right now, which I know all of you are. I'm learning new things about your generation, how most of you have NGOs already. Most of you are like already leading in such great ways. So one thing that I would be working on this month a lot, my calendar is, so if you read my vision statement, I was thinking to myself, I don't really need to wait for next year to become the Secretary General. Like, you take your position 1 January 2022. I can start implementing things right now. So I crowdsource ideas to create the statement. Now I'm going to crowdsource ideas for implementation. I'm sure there's someone smart here who can problem solve, create infographics, create content to explain the problem to the world. Oh yeah, that's one area I need help, guys. If someone is good at content creation, I can tell you like where the money flows, where things happen. If you can make infographics on that and spread the word. So I'm crowdsourcing solution, and LinkedIn is the platform I use the most for that. And Twitter and Instagram too, but that's something to, if you guys want to get involved in solution, because we're all a solution oriented generation. Like, I mean, we can talk about problems, but we want to move forward. But be disgusted at the fact that 15 cents goes to climate action. So you have to transition. Greta raised a movement for activism. I honestly don't think that's enough. I think that's not getting us where we want. We have to move to actionism. Like, you have to hold the powerful accountable. Okay, we're talking about it. Where's the money going? You say 10 billion is going. I mean, 10 billion is a big number, guys. It's B with a billion. Where is that money going? Ask the follow-up question. And that's what is critical to journalism too, but just take the story all the way through.
Thank you so much for your inspiring words. I think, yeah, if that's everything, we will end this event right now. Thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me, and go do great things in the world. I'm so glad I got the privilege to chat with you guys, and I'm looking out for you to be the next Secretary General somewhere down the road.
Thank you. And I think a lot of people in the chat are also saying how much they loved it.
Thank you so much, guys. So have a good evening. Bye.